Urgent, drones have launched a round-the-clock attack on Russia. The end of Russia has never been this close before. Everything happened suddenly. At this very moment, the Ukrainian armed forces have made a powerful breakthrough. Fire has engulfed half of Russia. Putin is furious and is opening a new front. The Zaporizhzhia direction is on edge. Syrskyi made an important announcement. Denmark is joining the battle against the Kremlin. Something happened that made the world hold its breath. Shock, Putin's secret base has been leaked. 50 Russian drones could be turned to ashes. Our forces have received the order. A massive strike is being prepared. And all of this happened just now. Hello, I'm Darina Hatsakalo, and we're getting started. Breaking news. Once again, Russia is startled awake by the sound of our birds. Drones arrived uninvited in the Stavropol region. Putin's pride, the Stavrolan plant, came under attack.
Previously, this facility was already attacked on October 29th, 2025.
Unknown drones also seriously bothered the Rostov region. There's action again.
Preliminarily, there are hits on the ground. Official Rostov claims everything was shot down, but locals reported a small fire.
The Loud Party didn't skip Oryol, Bryansk, Tula, Kaluga, and Moscow regions either. Breaking news from the front. Putin is driving soldiers into new assaults. Now all forces are focused on the Zaporizhzhia sector. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrskyi, made an urgent statement.
The enemy, taking advantage of its numerical superiority in manpower and equipment, advanced during fierce battles and captured 3 settlements. The soldiers of the Southern Military Group are engaged in exhausting battles for Rivnopilya and Yablukove. Appropriate support measures are being taken. The aggressor has suffered significant losses from combined fire. According
to Deep State, the enemy's advantage in manpower is making itself felt. A large part of the territory is under threat, including Huliaipole.
All this time, Huliaipole had been an impregnable city for the enemy, who at one point made great efforts to try to break into the city, particularly from the direction of Marfopil. Now a new route is opening up which could complicate the defense of this important settlement in the area.
Meanwhile, our allies are confidently holding a shield over Ukraine. Denmark has allocated a new package of military aid for weapons production and the purchase of arms from the United States.
Thanks to this donation package, we are providing Ukraine with a range of critically important capabilities in the coming months through the Danish model and the Pural initiative. There is still a great need to support Ukraine's fight for freedom.
It is known that the new package includes 100 million kroner for the Danish model, meaning the production of weapons directly in Ukraine, 370 million kroner for the Pearl initiative to purchase American weaponry, and 80 million kroner for fuel, which will be procured by the NATO Support and Procurement Agency. The Russian Federation is once again rattling its sabers. This time, attention has been drawn to a large-scale launch site for Shahed kamikaze drones in the Rostov region. Recently, analysts have leaked shocking data.
Overall, this is the largest launch site, with a total area of more than 5 square kilometers and a launch road over 2.5 kilometers long.
There are at least 93 garages and 15 hangars here for storing drones. This is not just a base, but a hive of drones. Over 500 sky machines gather here in a single day. Maybe it's time for the Russians to get ready to receive some fiery greetings from the Ukrainian armed forces in return. Russia has ramped up its use of strike drones. Shaheds are back in the sky. Putin has given the order for mass production of weapons, and there is evidence of sanctions being circumvented. The drones are deploying anti-tank mines and phosphorus. What is Putin's tactical plan? And does Ukraine have an effective countermeasure? More details on this in the following report.
Besides the war on the front lines, there is also a technological war underway.
Our enemy is highly technologically dangerous, cunning, and unpredictable, because he can change everything in an instant.
Communication systems, control systems, and electronic warfare, EW, play an important role. The key issue is integration, to be able to counter the enemy effectively.
The speeds are no longer the same, and so on. The enemy uses various means so that we will work to make their drones less vulnerable to our electronic warfare systems.
In 2024, jet-powered Shaheds equipped with electronic warfare countermeasures were spotted over Ukraine.
In fact, They are trying to preserve the large, unwieldy Shahed as an analog to FPV drones, which are controlled via radio channel directly from Russian territory or from occupied areas. That is, this Shahed is equipped with an onboard video camera that can transmit footage directly. Again, I repeat, that's not the point. At this very moment,
This is not the first time the Russians have upgraded the Shahed in their attempts to bypass Ukrainian air defense. CRPA antennas are devices that allow drones to maintain navigation even under active electronic jamming. These antennas are currently manufactured in Russia, but the technology was originally developed in Ukraine back in the early 2000s. Now, on enemy territory in
2025, the modernization of the tanks of death continues. They use FHSS technology across the entire frequency range, meaning it is resistant to EW pressure. But this is considered possible. To do this, we simply need to take a new approach to adapt, so to speak, to ourselves, to the tactics of the Russians.
The Russians have gone even further. They hid these antennas inside the body, removed them from the wing, and moved them inside the Shahed and to the center. In this way, the enemy's drones become virtually invulnerable to Ukraine's electronic warfare systems.
What does this tell an observant and intelligent person? It means that the factory has made modifications to the Shahed bodies specifically for these Chinese antennas. This means the enemy is confident in a long-term and stable cooperation with China. We cannot suppress such antennas with our existing electronic warfare systems everywhere across the country.
Serhiy Bezkresnov flash confirmed that this nuance indicates close cooperation between Russia and China. Russian billionaires are doing everything they can to help Putin in this war, establishing contacts with China and the USA, for example, Deripaska.
Access to technology and equipment is also closed off, and there is a range of products that are critical.
In 2024, the Russian LLC Angar 22 purchased Svivin turbojet engines for a total amount of about $300,000. Officially, they are intended for model aviation. However, these units later found a completely different use. They were installed on a jet-powered modification of the Iranian Shahed drone. At the same time, the owners of Angar 22 are classified, and information about the beneficiaries is concealed. According to old registry data, the founder was the joint stock company Krasko, which was linked to Deripaska. Other subsidiary structures, according to documents, are only partially state-owned. But there is also the development corporation South Invest. It is associated with the structure of that same Deripaska.
We know how it works under China: free economic zones, minimal taxes, cooperation.
Supplies to the company linked to Putin's wallet came directly from the Chinese manufacturer Swywin, which also has an American branch, Swywin USA. Hangar 22 is already under the American sanctions. In fact, the story of Hangar is an illustration of how the Russian military-industrial complex, cut off from Western technologies, looks for workarounds. This is how it cooperates with the states through China, under the guise of scientific research.
Russia currently ranks 4th in China's trade turnover. This fact significantly matters to everyone.
The Russians regularly upgrade their drones to carry out attacks on Ukraine. The Russian armed forces have started making them even deadlier for strikes. During attacks on the Sumy region, Russian occupiers began using Shaheds with anti-tank mines attached. They
continue to further scale up production. And as we should understand, having resources, having finances, having every opportunity, they will not stop.
Monitoring groups report that Russia is preparing Shaheds with phosphorus munitions. Being within 150 meters of the impact zone can lead to fatal consequences. The Kremlin is betting specifically on cheap kamikaze drones, not missiles. Therefore, they plan to increase the production of Shaheds and other types of UAVs. A plan has been set to produce at least 36,000 strike drones. The Ukrainian side is not resting on its laurels and continues to work on improving its own drones, interceptors, and more.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Recent events at the front, the situation is escalating. The armed forces of Ukraine are breaking through defensive lines. The enemy is suffering colossal losses. Tens of thousands of occupiers have been eliminated. President Zelensky makes a bold statement, while the Kremlin, enraged by its defeats, is preparing to open a new front in the fighting. At this moment, alarming information arrives. Russia is talking about the nuclear factor, and Germany is showing indecision. The world holds its breath. What is Putin planning? And are we standing on the brink of the irreversible? All the details are coming up in just a moment. In Russia, everything is as usual. The night is loud and bright. Explosions rang out in Tuapse. The local port was attacked by naval drones. On the front lines, the occupiers can't escape either. Ukrainian border guards destroyed 5 enemy shelters along with the Russians inside. Bashkortostan and Vologda also came under attack. 4 of the occupiers' military logistics facilities were destroyed at once. Ukraine's defense forces continue to clear Pokrovsk of occupiers. Russian troops have temporarily slowed the pace of their offensive in the city and its outskirts. At the same time, the invaders are blocking Ukrainian logistics in Myrnograd, hoping to break the city's defenses, writes the Institute.
regarding this incursion of Russian occupation forces in the Dobropilya direction.
The intensity of fighting in Pokrovsk has decreased, but this does not mean that the Russians have abandoned their plans to occupy the city. The Ukrainian command has plans for various possible developments, stated the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrskyi.
The existence of 2 plans indicates that all possible scenarios for the development of events, including those in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, are being worked out. According to the Russian side, the losses of the Russian army in Pokrovsk are comparable to those in Bakhmut. Let me remind you, the Russian occupation army lost about 90,000 personnel in Bakhmut.
And while the armed forces of Ukraine are fighting the occupiers, Putin is making new plans. Volodymyr Zelensky considers this quite likely, that Russia may open a second front against another European country before
In addition, the Russian Federation is constantly trying to raise the level of tension at the borders with NATO countries, specifically with Finland and Sweden.
In recent years, Russia has been actively using elements of hybrid warfare. Although Moscow traditionally denies any involvement, against the backdrop of Russian drone incursions, Britain is strengthening Belgium's defenses. Meanwhile, in Germany, they have admitted that they are not yet ready for war.
It's not just about shortages. Accordingly, the German side demands recognition that at the moment there is a shortage of both personnel and consequently equipment in the Bundeswehr. This is precisely why the German government's program is focused on financing both the German defense industry and accordingly strengthening the country's defense capabilities of the German state. And it is no coincidence that Germany ranks second after the United States in terms of military technical assistance to Ukraine.
Meanwhile, in Moscow, they continue to rattle their nuclear sabers. It seems this is the Kremlin's eternal scenario. Putin's spokesman Peskov made it clear that if the US actually conducts nuclear tests, Russia will be forced to respond in kind.
According to Western intelligence agencies, there is currently activity observed on the Russian side at the test site on the archipelago of Novaya Zemlya. In other words, this is yet another escalation of so-called stakes by Putin and accordingly the Russian Federation. Putin fully understands that the nuclear argument is the last resort that the Russian Federation can use in negotiations with the United States at the moment of ending the war in Ukraine.
In turn, Ukraine, together with its European Union partners, is preparing proposals for the 20th package of sanctions against Russia, which is expected to include additional restrictions on the Russian energy sector, the shadow fleet, and companies that support the aggressor's military-industrial complex. At this very moment, Europe is facing an unprecedented threat. A drone wall is already standing in the way of Russian unmanned aerial vehicles, which are falling right before the eyes of the world. Moscow has received its first resounding counterstrike, and Ukraine is demonstrating the technological leadership of its armed forces. Tension on the continent is reaching a critical point. Europe's security is now being decided literally live on air. The West is joining forces while the Kremlin grits its teeth. This is a moment that could change the rules of the game. The details of this extraordinary operation are coming up in the report. After a series of Russian drone incursions into the airspace of European countries, it became clear that the old air defense systems can no longer cope. These cheap drones, flying in swarms, break through conventional defense schemes and deplete stocks of expensive missiles and combat aircraft. This very challenge became the impetus for the European Union's ambitious initiative. Practically,
all countries, regardless of region, whether it's Eastern, Northern, or Western Europe, have faced manifestations of this new type of hybrid action by the Russian Federation in the sky, violations of their airspace. And the fact that a response is needed is already undeniable.
the idea is to create a unified defense system along the EU's eastern border, where sensors, radars, satellites, interceptors, and artificial intelligence will be able to detect, classify, and neutralize threats in real time.
We need to create a European system that will enable Europe to develop advanced drone solutions inspired by what is already being done in Ukraine.
It is Ukraine that plays a key role in this development. 4 years of war have made Ukrainian experience critically valuable. Here, tactics are tested, technologies are refined, and production chains for combat and counter-drone systems are established. In combat conditions, not on a training ground.
Now, drones have changed absolutely everything. And the best drone experts in the world are Ukrainians. I saw a video of a situation where a swarm of drones retreats from a single soldier. Even a single drone can lure a soldier into a trap while another attacks him from the other side. So we are already seeing how drones are becoming increasingly deadly. This will change the way wars are fought in every country. And it's not just drones. It's also about how to protect your roads, how to protect your airports, how to prevent drones from invading your territory. That's why Europe must quickly learn from Ukrainians how to defend its skies.
Ukraine offers not only experience but also an industrial base. Local manufacturers such as TechX can supply equipment, train operators, share combat experience and standardize solutions to meet Europe's needs. The integration of Ukrainian technologies and expertise will make it possible to create adaptive, fast and cost-effective systems capable of operating in real combat conditions. Funding is already being processed through the SAFE instrument and the EU defense budget, which provides up to 100 billion euros for the eastern flank. The drone wall plan includes 3 directions: drone, land, and maritime lines of defense, which must be integrated into a single system. It will be able to control the airspace from the Baltic to the Black Sea.
According to the information and news we read from different countries, self-determination is currently at the stage of either being found or forming a consensus between the internal situations in each individual country, which may require possible changes in legislation, and how this will subsequently be coordinated at the collective level. That is, in order to reach a common level, a unified position at the level of the European Union countries, NATO countries, it is necessary to reach an agreement within each country, understanding that in some places this will require changes to legislation, while elsewhere it will require more thorough explanations to society, so that the actions are clear, there is support and there is understanding, which is important for countries with democracy where there is a constant electoral process where any step can be used by the opposition.
This project is part of a larger strategy called SHY 2030. These are 4 initiatives aimed at strengthening the EU's external corridors, protecting against drones, creating a joint air defense system, and even providing space services for military needs. The main goal is to deter Russia and Belarus, especially considering that by 2030, the capabilities of the Russian armed forces may increase. The plan is to strengthen the eastern border by the end of 2026 and by 2027 to deploy a drone defense wall. At the same time, the EU is creating an integrated air defense system. Space-based intelligence, communication and navigation services will support defense tasks. However, experts warn that bureaucracy and slow processes in Europe could delay the project. But if Europe can quickly establish this cooperation, the Shield 2030 could become a new line of defense that will protect not only EU countries but also Ukraine. With that, we put a period on our broadcast. We continue right now to follow the most relevant events so we can be the first to tell you about them. Don't forget to subscribe. See you.